At a luxury hotel, a rich woman took one look at the quiet man standing near the reception desk and decided he didn't belong. His clothes were simple, his manner calm, and in a lobby built on status and appearances, that was enough for her to mock him out loud. She thought she was humiliating a nobody in front of the entire room. What she didn't know was that the man she was judging was Keanu Reeves. And before the next few minutes were over, everyone in that hotel was about to witness a truth far more powerful than money, image, or social status. Real class never has to announce itself. The lobby itself seemed designed to remind people where they stood. Polished marble floors reflected the chandeliers above. Soft piano music floated through the air, and every detail, from the gold-trimmed reception desk to the fresh white orchids near the concierge, announced luxury, exclusivity, and status. The rich woman wore that atmosphere like a second skin. Her designer coat, diamond jewelry, and perfectly measured smile were less about elegance than performance. She wanted to be seen. She wanted the room to understand exactly who she believed she was. Then she looked back at the quiet man beside the reservation line. Keanu Reeves stood with simple clothes, tired shoes, and the kind of calm posture that didn't ask for attention. He wasn't impatient. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. But in a place like that, his plain appearance became an invitation for judgment. The woman gave him a slow, dismissive glance, the kind meant to reduce a person before a single word was spoken. "Some people really do walk in anywhere," she said, just loudly enough for the receptionist, the concierge, and half the lobby to hear. A few bystanders turned. One couple near the elevators exchanged looks. A bellman lowered his eyes. The receptionist froze for a second, sensing the shift in the room, while the woman stepped closer to the desk as if her reservation entitled her to control the entire space. Her voice sharpened. "This is a luxury hotel, not a shelter. I assume he's lost." There it was now. No longer sarcasm, no longer a passing rude comment, but open condescension, public humiliation. Class prejudice dressed up as sophistication. She had taken a first impression and turned it into a verdict. Still, Keanu didn't react the way she expected. No anger, no argument, no wounded protest. Just composure, just dignity. He lifted his eyes toward the receptionist and said, in a calm, even tone, "I'm here to check in." That simple sentence changed the energy of the room. The concierge looked again. The woman's sneer tightened. Around them, whispers began to spread through the lobby, small and uncertain at first, then sharper, more curious, because arrogance had entered the scene expecting obedience. But what it met instead was restraint, and without realizing it, the woman had just taken the first step toward a very public fall. The receptionist turned to the screen again, but her fingers slowed above the keyboard. Something in the name, or maybe in the quiet certainty of the man standing before her, had shifted her expression. The concierge noticed it too. His polite smile faded into concentration as he looked from Keanu Reeves to the reservation monitor, then back to the woman whose confidence was beginning to fill the entire lobby like perfume that had become too strong. But the rich woman mistook that pause for validation. She adjusted the strap of her designer handbag, lifted her chin, and gave a soft laugh meant for the crowd around her. "You see," she said, glancing at the receptionist, "this is exactly what I mean. People come into places like this and expect service just because they can stand in line." The words landed hard, not because they were loud, but because they were cruel in such a practiced way. This wasn't random rudeness. This was habit. The kind of polished contempt that comes from years of believing money is the same thing as class. A murmur moved through the bystanders. A man near the elevator stopped checking his phone. A woman seated beneath the tall window lowered her coffee cup without taking a sip. Even the piano music seemed distant now, as if the whole hotel lobby had narrowed into one painful little stage. Keanu remained still. No defensive speech, no wounded pride, just that same quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to compete with arrogance because it already knows its own worth. "I believe there's a reservation under my name," he said. The receptionist swallowed and nodded. "Yes, sir," she answered, more carefully this time. "I'm just confirming the details." The woman's expression changed for only a second, but it was enough. The first crack. Not shame yet, not remorse, not even disbelief. Just irritation that the script was no longer obeying her. She had expected removal, embarrassment, maybe an apology from the staff for allowing someone like him to stand near her. Instead, the hotel was beginning to treat him like a guest, and that threatened everything. She stepped closer to the desk, lowering her voice into something colder. "You may want to double-check that," she said. "Some people are very good at pretending." Now the silence was heavier. Even the receptionist seemed stunned by the accusation. The concierge straightened, his professional calm turning into alert attention. This was no longer a scene about a difficult guest. It was becoming a test of integrity, of who would keep bowing to status and who would recognize the truth standing right in front of them. The receptionist looked at the screen one more time. Then her eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. And in that tiny flicker of recognition, the entire balance of the room began to change. For a brief second, the receptionist said nothing at all. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, then lifted carefully toward the man in front of her, as if she suddenly understood that the entire scene had been built on a terrible assumption. The change in her expression was subtle, but in a tense hotel lobby, subtle was enough. The concierge saw it immediately. He stepped forward with renewed professionalism, his voice lower now, more precise. "Sir," he said to Keanu, "thank you for your patience." That single sentence hit the room harder than any shout could have. The rich woman turned, her confidence slipping beneath the surface for the first time. "Patience?" she repeated, almost laughing. "You cannot be serious." But no one was looking at her the same way anymore. The receptionist straightened her posture and glanced toward a private hallway behind the reception desk. A quiet signal passed between her and the concierge, and within moments the hotel manager appeared. He moved with the calm urgency of someone who understood both guest relations and risk. The risk of failing to recognize an important guest, and the greater risk of allowing arrogance to humiliate someone in public. The manager approached Keanu first, not the woman in the jewelry, not the loudest voice in the room. Keanu. "Mr. Reeves," he said, with immediate respect, "I'm very sorry for the delay." Silence fell so completely that even the clink of glasses from the lounge seemed far away. There it was. No longer suspicion, no longer whispers, no longer a flicker of recognition buried in a computer screen. A name, a confirmation, a truth spoken out loud in front of everyone. The woman's face lost color. Her stare moved from Keanu to the manager, then back again, as though disbelief alone might undo what she had just heard. But the social balance had already collapsed. The man she had judged by appearance mocked at the reservation desk, and treated like he didn't belong, was not only a legitimate guest, he was Keanu Reeves. Around the lobby, bystanders reacted in waves. A soft gasp near the elevator, a hand over a mouth, someone whispering, "Oh my God." The receptionist looked almost embarrassed on behalf of the hotel itself. The concierge remained composed, though even he seemed stunned by how far the scene had gone. And through all of it, Keanu stood exactly as he had before, calm, restrained, untouched by the performance of status that had consumed everyone else. The manager continued, now speaking with formal care. "Your suite is ready, sir. We've prepared everything." Suite. That word landed like a final blow, because it shattered the rich woman's last defense, that he was confused, misplaced, pretending or trying to enter a world above him. No, he belonged here more completely than anyone had realized, and the cruel irony of it was now visible to every person in the room. She had tried to publicly reduce him to nothing. Instead, she had exposed herself. No one moved at first. The woman stood frozen beside the reception desk, her designer handbag still hanging from her arm, her jewelry catching the chandelier light as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had. Just seconds earlier, those status symbols had seemed like armor. Now they looked strangely hollow, like props from a performance that had ended too soon. Her social mask was slipping, and everyone in the lobby could see it. The awkward silence that followed was almost worse than the reveal itself. A man near the elevators looked away, not out of indifference, but out of second-hand embarrassment. The couple by the lounge exchanged another glance, this time without hiding it. Even the staff, trained to preserve elegance under pressure, seemed caught between professionalism and disbelief. The woman had wanted attention, and now she had it in the worst possible way. This was no longer just a mistake. It was a public downfall. For the first time, her expression lost all trace of superiority. The sneer was gone. So was the polished confidence, the vanity, the effortless condescension she had worn like perfume. In its place came something far more fragile. Shame. Real shame. The kind that arrives not when you are corrected in private, but when your character is revealed in public. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then stopped. Her eyes moved quickly around the room, searching for an escape, a face-saving line, some excuse that might put the broken pieces of her pride back together. I didn't realize," she said at last. But even she seemed to hear how weak it sounded, because that had never been the point. She hadn't failed to recognize a celebrity. She had failed something much more basic than that: fairness, decency, humanity. She had looked at a man's simple appearance and turned it into permission to humiliate him. And still, Keanu Reeves did not use the moment against her. He didn't smirk. He didn't lecture her. He didn't enjoy the comeuppance the room seemed ready to hand him. He simply looked at her with the same calm expression he had worn from the beginning, as though her cruelty had not changed his inner character at all. That quiet restraint altered the atmosphere again. The story was no longer only about her arrogance. It was about his grace under pressure. The manager stepped slightly aside, waiting. The receptionist lowered her eyes. The concierge remained still. Then Keanu spoke, and his voice was gentle enough to make the silence feel even heavier. "It's all right," he said. "Everyone makes assumptions." The words were kind, but their kindness made the truth sharper, not softer. Because in that moment, the entire lobby understood something the woman was only beginning to face. Money could buy a suite, jewelry, influence, and the illusion of status. But it could not buy dignity. It could not buy authenticity. And it certainly could not buy class. The woman lowered her eyes, and for the first time since the scene began, she seemed less concerned with how she looked and more concerned with what she had done. That was the real shift, not the loss of status, not the damage to her reputation in front of strangers. Something deeper, the painful realization that all her elegance, all her wealth, all the polished signals of importance she had carried into the hotel meant nothing beside a moment of simple human decency. And she had failed that test completely. She drew in a breath, but even that seemed unsteady now. "Mr. Reeves," she said quietly, her voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, "I owe you an apology." No one interrupted. The lobby remained still, as if the entire room understood that this mattered more than the reveal itself. An apology, if it came honestly, would be the first sign that shame had turned into remorse. "I judged you," she continued. "I made assumptions about who you were, and I said things that were cruel. There's no excuse for that." The words were careful, but they were no longer performative. The edge of entitlement was gone. So was the vanity that had shaped every earlier sentence. What remained was vulnerability, awkward, exposed, and unmistakably real. A few bystanders looked at her differently now, not with admiration, not yet, but with the cautious attention people give someone standing at the edge of self-awareness. Because this was the moment when a public humiliation could harden into bitterness, or open into transformation. Keanu listened without changing his expression. He didn't rush to rescue her from discomfort, but he didn't weaponize it either. That balance, firm, calm, compassionate, gave his silence its own kind of authority. Then he nodded once. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. It was such a simple sentence, yet it carried more grace than anyone expected. He wasn't dismissing what happened. He wasn't pretending the cruelty had been harmless. But he was leaving room for something rare in places ruled by ego. Accountability without spectacle. The manager exhaled softly, as though the pressure inside the room had shifted. The receptionist's shoulders relaxed. Even the concierge, who had remained composed through the entire confrontation, seemed to recognize that the scene had moved beyond status and into something more human. The woman swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said again, and this time the words landed differently, less like damage control, more like surrender. Not surrender to Keanu's fame, but to the truth. That she had mistaken appearance for worth, that she had confused wealth with class, that she had performed superiority without possessing the character to support it. Keanu glanced briefly around the lobby, the staff, the bystanders, the faces still holding traces of disbelief, and then back at her. "What matters," he said gently, "is what you do after you realize you were wrong." The line settled over the room like a final mirror. Because suddenly, this was no longer only her lesson. It belonged to everyone watching, every guest, every staff member, every person who had ever trusted a first impression too quickly. And standing there beneath the chandeliers of that luxury hotel, the woman seemed to understand that the moment was no longer about surviving embarrassment. It was about deciding who she would be next. For a long moment, the woman said nothing more. She simply stood there, in the glow of the chandelier light, no longer protected by designer fashion, jewelry, or the performance of status that had seemed so powerful only minutes earlier. The luxury hotel lobby had not changed. The marble floors still shined. The piano still played softly somewhere in the background. The reception desk still stood beneath its gold trim. But the meaning of the room had changed completely. What had once felt like a stage for privilege had become a mirror. And in that mirror, everyone had seen the same truth. The woman gave a small nod, the kind that comes when pride has finally run out of places to hide. "I understand," she said. Her voice was quiet now, almost fragile. "I'll remember this." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't polished. But that was exactly why it mattered. For the first time that evening, she was no longer speaking from ego, vanity, or entitlement. She was speaking from humility. Keanu offered her a gentle smile, not one of triumph, not one of pity, but something far rarer, simple human grace. "That's enough," he said. Those 3 words seemed to release the room. The tension that had held the bystanders in place slowly dissolved. People looked at one another differently now. The receptionist straightened, as though she too had learned something about fairness and first impressions. The concierge returned to stillness, though the respect in his expression had deepened. Even the manager, who had spent his career surrounded by wealth, seemed to understand that he had just witnessed something money could never buy. The woman stepped back. No longer the loudest presence in the room, no longer the center of attention she had worked so hard to become. And somehow, in that smaller, quieter version of herself, she looked more real than before, not redeemed all at once, not transformed into someone perfect, but changed enough to know that change was now required. Keanu turned toward the manager, thanked the staff, and prepared to head to his suite, with the same quiet confidence he had carried from the beginning. No grand speech, no public lesson delivered for applause. He didn't need one. His character had already said everything, because in the end, the unforgettable lesson in that hotel lobby was never really about celebrity. It was not about fame, reputation, or the shock of discovering who the quiet guest really was. It was about the danger of judgment, the emptiness of arrogance, and the difference between appearing important and actually possessing inner worth. The rich woman had entered that night believing class came from wealth, image, and exclusivity. She left knowing that real class looks like patience. It sounds like restraint. It moves with compassion. And when it is insulted, it still chooses dignity. And as Keanu Reeves walked away beneath the warm lights of that luxury hotel, the people who had watched the scene unfold understood something they would not forget. You can mistake simple clothes for weakness. You can mistake silence for insignificance. You can mistake humility for powerlessness. But sooner or later, truth reveals character, and real greatness never needs to announce itself.